Those are some great words of wisdom, especially that prayer that you shared. And this one's kind of, at least along the same lines, talking about how God is acting in America over time, how God's acting through politicians. Scott, I'm going to ask you this question. Sure. Someone said, could this election and whoever wins the presidency be the greater start of the end times and the downward spiral of America? Not a really positive view. And no longer be the most powerful, or America would no longer be the most powerful nation on the earth.
Yeah, I think, boy, abortion to end time. And then he gets something about being a fool.
I want to hear this because I want to know if I should retire or not.
I'm out of here.
That's what I got. Wow. So, I preached a little bit over this topic over this last week, just for in brief passing. Apocalyptic language seems so far-fetched, but when you do hear people saying things like, is Trump being elected going to usher in the end times, or is Hillary the one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse? You hear just really weird and maybe not weird, but really kind of depressing things like this. And I think the thing that it has to do is it has to point us back to God. I think that there's probably been language like this as long as there's been a presidential election. I'm sure that Woodrow Wilson probably had people saying, oh, if he gets elected, it'll be the end of times. And I don't see anything that points particularly towards that being the end times when Jesus speaks of the signs of the end times. Wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, famines, that stuff's going on, and it's been going on since he was here, you know. And that the gospel would be proclaimed throughout the whole world. That was the last of the signs. And so, yeah, we find ourselves in the church with a great mission there that's even outside of who's the president of the United States or who's king of the whole world. It doesn't really matter to God. What matters to God is that the gospel is advanced. So I think that's the best I can do with that question, unfortunately.
That's good. That's good. I think we, as Lutherans, have believed that since Jesus ascended into heaven to be with the Father, that we've been living in the end times. So today we're closer to the last day than we were yesterday. So in some sense we are coming closer. It could be tomorrow. I mean, Scripture is pretty darn clear. No one knows the day or the hour except the Father in heaven. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how that works with the Trinity. Jesus is a part of the Trinity, and yet somehow that knowledge is withheld from even Him. So only the Father knows. I think the biggest thing is that we then be focused on the church's mission.
That we're ready.
That this is, it's urgent, right? Telling people about Christ is urgent because it might end tomorrow. Yep. It might be a year from now, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't change our mission. So I think when we think of end times, it can be helpful if it motivates us and moves us in that way, not in a spirit of fear and trepidation. Often use the example of if you're a Christian refugee, say even from Syria that's fleeing, or you're one of those Christians that used to be in Mosul, Iraq, right? One of the oldest places of Christianity in the world. It feels a lot more like the end times than if you're on my couch watching the Vikings eating a bowl of popcorn. But we're still living in the same time, in the same place. All right? And so, we're getting closer to the end now. History also tells us that empires don't usually last too long, maybe 300 years. Right? We're kind of getting to that point in America, so maybe will this election be ushering in our downward spiral as a nation? Could be the things we see throughout history of nations that fall as they stop worrying about life, they stop valuing life. Things like sexuality get out of control. Things like being selfish and immoral, those things all get out of control. And that happened to Rome, happened to the Greeks. It seems to be happening to us as well. So will we be the most powerful nation? 50 years? I don't know.
I think there is something that's curious about the discipleship walk, that sometimes we need to hear something like it's the end times for us to have that urgency that you're talking about, right? And I think there's something that we've got to wrestle with. Why do we have to have something that's apocalyptic to have that urgency? right? Because that is not the call of Jesus. I mean, he told his disciples, hey, drop everything, come and follow me. There was a sense of urgency right now.
Daily life.
Leave your family, leave everything. And certainly there's some time since from Jesus till right now. And so I think as disciples, we've got to say, do we have that urgency, no matter what time it is?
Honestly, I don't think we do, and I think a big part of that is because of the way we have things here in America. We're very comfortable. We're very content with where we are in our world, and we don't have a sense of urgency about much of anything at all, other than making sure we get to our meetings on time, get our kids to soccer in the morning.
You're
but when it
urgent
comes
about
to
I haven't noticed that yet.
But, when it comes to that sense of urgency, when it comes to advancing the gospel, I don't think we have that. And I think that, honestly, the United States of America taking a hit and maybe waking us up a little bit isn't necessarily the worst of things. It may not equate to the end times and fire and brimstone raining down from heaven, but it hopefully it'll get us going in a direction which is a God-pleasing direction.
There's a quote I read recently, and I love it. It says that discipleship, it starts at the end of comfort. And I think when we said we are so comfortable, you talk about the couch watching the Vikings, even though it wasn't very comfortable last Sunday. I'll tell you, there's something about that. We get too comfortable. We lose that sense of urgency a little bit. So I'm curious to see what is coming, and maybe it's a good thing for us to be a little uncomfortable. Well, in fact, I would say it is good for us to be a little uncomfortable, because it will create a different sense in us of our mission and movement of the gospel.
Yeah. Moving right along here, Tom, I'm gonna ask you another difficult question a little bit, and I'll try to exegete this one a little bit, explain it a little bit for you. Someone asked a really good question: how should Christians reconcile voting based on morals versus people's rights? So I'm taking that to mean, how do we reconcile voting on, hey, these are the things that we believe are important as Christians, and so we hope that that's the way our nation functions, versus saying, hey, people have, in the democratic society, they have rights to kind of live according to their freedoms, and then the church just works with it.
Yeah. It's a great question, and the tension there is, I'm not sure exactly how to break it down, because I see both sides of it. In fact, a friend of mine was a congressperson here in Minnesota when the whole initiative on gay marriage came up, and the amendment, to write it into law that marriage is between a man and a woman, and it was voted down. And she, in her politics, was very libertarian, meaning government should not be involved in these sort of things. And all right, in America, liberty and justice for all. Right, so that means them as well as us, if you want to put it in that language. And so she had that on one side, and then this other sense of I know that this is what Scripture teaches about marriage, and that's a big part of who I am as well. And it was interesting talking with her through that process, and where she landed actually was a result of more people were calling in from her constituents saying vote no on this than were saying vote yes. And one of her frustrations that she shared with me was, why don't I hear from Christians during this time? They don't call me and tell me which direction they want me to go, and so I just hear from the constituents on the other side, and I'm supposed to be representing my constituents. And so she actually voted no on the amendment. But it was this tension where she's like, morally, I don't believe in this, but according to the way that our Constitution is written and functions, maybe they should have that right. In fact, she was busy at work trying to change it. Actually wrote an amendment trying to change it from being marriage to being a civil union or something where they would receive the same rights as a person who's married to someone of the other opposite sex. I think it's something you have to approach with a lot of prayer and conversation with others. In my own mind, I don't know that I could vote to enact something that went against what I believe is morally correct. But this gets hard. I mean, you talk about baking cakes and who you bake cakes to, and who can you take pictures for, and should a Christian have to do this or should they not? What is our role to play in that as Christians? Do we just do it to give a good witness, even though maybe that goes against our morals? I mean, we're having this conversation with people whose kids and friends and relatives are getting married, and they're asking us, what should we do? Do we go? Is that saying this is okay? But I don't want to break the relationship because I want to continue to influence them. We're in a time and age where a lot of these issues aren't as black and white as we want them to be, and so we try to handle them, as you hear us say around here a lot, with the same way Jesus did, truth and grace. And when you try to live in the tension of those two things, it can get messy at times, and sometimes you give too much truth, and sometimes you give too much grace. It's just the way it is. So I don't know if that even answers the question. I wasn't trying to avoid it. I'm not a politician on that debate. But I honestly don't have an easy answer. I don't know if you guys do.
I think you touched on an aspect that is worth speaking about, that if the number of Christians we have here in America and throughout the world, if every Christian lived the way that Christ would want them to live, there'd be no need for government, because everything would work the way God intended it to work. We would be charitable to those who need charity. We would be able to provide the needs for those who have needs. And our government wouldn't have to legislate homosexual marriage and abortion and poverty needs, because Christians would step up and take care of their neighbor. And so I think if you have to focus on anything, focus on living our lives as Christians more and more every day, month, and year, and then hopefully the needs of government will be like, oh well, the church has that covered. We'll go focus on protecting our borders or whatever the other thing they want to argue about.
Oh yeah. And I think, not to actually comment at all on my own, but I think when you mentioned that grace and truth thing, it just brought back to my mind thinking about whenever we look at the Gospels, Jesus approaches very different people in very different ways. I mean, that was just something that it takes a lot of work on our part to get to know someone a little bit better, to know exactly where they're coming from without making a snap decision. Jesus knew people in their heart, like on a moment's notice, which is an amazing thing. But you see him say one thing to one person and another thing to another person, and he kind of reads exactly where they're at and gives them exactly what they need. And so that's definitely important.